decorators, welcome back. This is video 2 in our series of 3 where we're talking about the intro to the cake method. So what is it? So in video 1 we talked about the fact that the method is basic cake decorating skills that are combined to create elaborate designs quickly.
But not just any basic skills.
Well, actually, that's true. There really are specific skills that are put together with a pro in mind. So each step of the way that you're learning very specific skills that you can put together a really elaborate design quickly. And quickly means like as if you're going to work in a shop. So that's the way it's designed so that people can really get the most out of a quick education. So
yeah.
It's also a refresh for those who are experienced decorators already. Something we talked about in video 1 is lots of times decorators have holes in their education. So it doesn't allow them to put together the cake as professionally, really, or as quickly as they could. So the method really covers all of that for beginners all the way to pros. So the question is,
how do we know it works?
Well, we know because of the hundreds of apprentices that my mom has taught, that I've taught, that Leah's taught, as well as how many views on YouTube do we have now?
70 million.
Yeah, pretty close to 70 million. That's huge. But what's more impressive than that is the decorators literally scattered around the globe who've written to us and told us that they've started businesses based on the methods that we've just taught on YouTube, which have not been comprehensive and put together step by step. So people have gleaned just from the way we teach a way to create businesses. I mean, I find that absolutely amazing.
I think it's super cool that people have opened businesses based on just our method. That's pretty awesome.
It's actually the best part of what we do. It makes me the most excited about it. So I want to tell another little story that is kind of good, but also kind of bad, to show how we know that this method works.
I kind of feel like your stories have a theme.
What?
Like you don't have just like good stories. There's like, your stories are good, but also kind of bad.
I think that's kind of the basis for a good story. There's always, something bad happens and something good happens. So here's the story. It's about some of the apprentices that I've taught over the years. Now, really, the bad part has only happened to a handful, but it just shows how effective it is. So here it is. When I taught in a shop and I would teach an apprentice who was meant to either work alongside me or was going off to another store to be on their own. After about 2 weeks, they would start to get the most amazing compliments. Their cakes were looking professional, put together. I mean, like a pro. I mean, they were just really good. So occasionally I would have an apprentice who sort of got, well, too big for their britches. Meaning that they decided after 2 weeks they were good enough to take over the whole show. I mean, it's kind of amazing that they would feel that great about themselves because they really were that good. After 2 weeks, they still had some holes in their education and weren't really ready to take over the whole show. But the amazing thing is that their work looked like they could. So that's how we know how well this method works. And I did see it time and time again. People would do so well that after a couple of weeks, their work looked amazing. So that's one of the ways we know. Another way is Leah's story.
I'm actually one of the apprentices. And I've been watching my grandma and my mom decorate for a long time, but I never even started till I was about 18. And I had to learn the basics. It was, borders and blocking and all of that stuff. I had to learn the basics from scratch, and I could learn pretty fast, but some things were a little hard, just like everybody. But the one thing that I had to do before I could even start doing borders, before I could even start doing flowers, not one anything, was blocking the cake. My grandma made me block a cake 10 times before I got it perfect. And then when I got it perfect, I had to block it another 5 times. Because blocking is the most important. It is absolutely the most important because your cake needs to be straight up and down. It needs to be square. And if it's not, you could have super pretty flowers and super pretty border. But if your cake looks like this, it just ruins the whole thing. So it's super, super important. And that's actually what I'm going to show you in this video.
Yeah, it's really true. That's what we call a no. Like, you don't decorate a cake that's not iced well. And so Leah used a term that we use all the time. And if you're familiar with us from YouTube, you'll know it. It's called blocking. But it really means icing the cake. It includes building the cake. It includes the crumb icing. And it includes the final icing and the finishing. The whole thing is called blocking. Now, if you are familiar with quilting or painting of any kind, blocking will be a familiar term to you. It really means getting things laid out perfectly before you start the final process. So I don't really know exactly why in cake decorating we call it blocking, but I think that's why. It's because everything is put together and you have a really good foundation. So I'm going to let Leah show you that since she is such an expert. And just so you know, that really is a standard practice, that an apprentice learns to block perfectly, expertly, before they actually begin to decorate. And that's what Leah did. So she's going to show you. I'll actually talk to you about the technique she's using and some of the equipment. Let's get started. So as we get started here, I want to show you, Leah's actually starting out with 2 6-inch round cakes. And we've actually put some filling in the middle to level. And that's, part of what we teach actually in the course is the leveling part of it. But today we're actually talking about the icing part of it. And she's going to be using a tip called a quick icer. Many of you are familiar with this, but those who aren't, it's a cake icer or a quick icer. And it's about a 2-inch wide tip with one serrated side and one flat side. And she's also using an 18-inch bag. So normally a decorator might put a plop of icing on top and then spread it around. But you see how quickly Leah used the quick icer, and then just this, which is an offset spatula. Any spatula will work though. Leah's preference is an offset. We're actually decorating right on, or icing right on the turntable. Now this is a commercial turntable, but you can buy one anywhere, and it's a heavy metal one. I highly recommend them. However, when you're just starting out, you can really use anything. In fact, if you watch our videos, a lot of times you will see that we're using an old Lazy Susan for larger cakes. That's a terrible sound.
Yeah, it really is.
So you saw that Leah put 3 bands of icing using the quick icer. And then now she's using a piece of equipment called a bench knife or a table scraper. She's using the momentum of the turntable while keeping the bench knife really in one place. It gives a super smooth look on the outside. And if you'll notice, she didn't have to use a crumb ice for this. Now crumb ice, or some of you call it crumb coat, is something that we do use occasionally, Leah and I, but for the most part we don't have to because of this method, using these tools and this method. Now this is called knocking down, and what she's doing is knocking down the edges and just pulling back across the top of her cake. This also gives a super even layer of icing around your cake, so you don't have too much icing. That's the great thing about this as well, and it's very even. What she's doing right now is also making sure the top of her cake is very flat. In fact, we refer to it as square, meaning that it's straight up and down and flat this way. So it's a little bit of extra leveling, and you can get those tiny bits of millimeters off the top using this.
Also, I'd just like to add that when you're doing something like this and you're really focusing, you really have to remember to not hold your breath and breathe while you're decorating. That's really important.
That's true. In fact, we have a whole video in the method showing that, how to breathe, how to stand, how to hold yourself. So that is really how quickly you can create a beautifully iced cake with some really simple tools. So lots of times this is the way that you would do this. You would ice it right on your turntable. On the turntable, not even on a board. And then just move it right over to whatever surface you're going to start decorating on. There you go. Really, really pretty. Nice job, Leah.
Thank you.
So now you know a couple of the insider tips, tricks that pros use to get a really beautifully blocked cake. And you know a brand new term as well. So we promised a few things in the last video that we would talk about. A few of the questions that you guys asked, you were so kind to answer our questionnaire, but some of the things that you were really kind of concerned about. So, what were they, Leah?
So the first one was that you have to be super talented to be a professional cake decorator. So it's really not true. I mean, if you're interested in this, you have a little bit of talent at least, right?
Oh, some artistic interest anyway. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so my grandma, she is the one who started this whole method, this whole thing. And she taught herself out of books. And my grandma is left-handed. She doesn't have the best handwriting,
no,
I would say.
She doesn't.
She can't draw much except for stick figures.
Mm-hmm.
But she is an amazing cake decorator. She learned how to do all of the flowers, all of the figure piping, and the borders. And she's a great blocker. And she writes amazing on cakes too.
Yeah, it's really true. She didn't start out with a lot of artistic talent or even considered herself an artist. She has a nice eye for color, that's true, and she dresses well and puts her face on well, all of that, but she really isn't an artist. So the point is that you don't have to be either. And really so many of the apprentices that I've trained over the years myself really weren't artistic people to start out, but found that they were excellent cake decorators. You really just have to have an ability to learn and the patience to practice.
Yeah, I think it's a really perfect story as an answer to your worry about that, because you know, from not being able to draw anything but a stick figure to being able to do super adorable figure piped teddy bears on a cake. I mean, yeah, it's a perfect example. It really is, I think.
Yeah, now if you happen to be a floral designer or an artist of any kind, or somebody who knows about color theory, photographer, you'll be amazing at this because you'll understand the elemental pieces that need to go together for it to all work out, but it's certainly not necessary. The other big question that we got, a lot of concern really, was that it's expensive to become a cake decorator if you're just starting out. And I want to tell you, this is just not true. Most of the pieces that we showed you today are literally under $5. Now, the only thing we showed you today that's more than $5 is the turntable. But I'll tell you, over the years, we have found turntables on Craigslist, in the newspaper, at yard sales. In fact, I think the one that Leah uses the most came from a decorator who was a decorator in World War II on the naval bases. That's how old it is, but it's still amazing. One of my favorite pieces of equipment is a turntable that I inherited from a baker. I think that it is more than 60 years old. Still working amazing. So these things can be found super inexpensively. Tips are a matter of pennies. The bags are a matter of pennies. And so much of the stuff, including pans, can be found secondhand, really, really inexpensively. So
yeah, you can always find that kind of stuff everywhere. And especially when you're first starting out and you're just getting the tools together, you can always find all of that stuff for very inexpensive.
Yeah, in fact, we have a lot of mixers, and you do need an electric mixer. And the one that I actually used the most, it was inherited. Somebody gave it to me. It was my good friend's great-grandmother, and she didn't want any more, so she gave it to me, and I still use it. So we do have some new ones as well. But I'll tell you, you can find them anywhere. Ask around to family and friends. You will find people who thought they wanted to be decorators, didn't have the method to learn from, and gave up. So it's all out there. The last thing was, the other biggest thing that we found is people said there's no time. They were worried about the time that it would take to learn to be a decorator. That's why we set up this course specifically, so that each lesson is 10, 15, 20 minutes long. They're short lessons, so that a person could learn what they need, practice, and move on to the next one. So really, if you have 5 minutes a day to practice, by the end of the week, you're going to have that particular skill down. If you had 10 or 15, well, multiply it by that. It really is very quick if you're learning in this specific succession and understand the basics, the underlying reasons that you're doing things, and how you're doing them specifically to get the result you want. So it really depends on how you're learning, how long it takes. And with this method, it's meant to really have you be up and running in a matter of about 2 weeks. So there's that. I hope we answered those well enough for you. So this time, please leave your comments below. We want to know, what other concerns do you have? What did you learn from this that you liked the best? And what more do you want to know?
So in our next video, we're going to take all of the skills that we teach you in the intro to the method, and we're going to make a cake in 5 minutes or less. So it's going to be pretty awesome. It'll be pretty fast, and it will look super easy, and after you take the intro to the method, it will be.
Yeah, you'll see what we mean and how it gets put together so quickly. And what I want you to know about this before we do it is that it's not the exception to the rule, it's the rule if you are actually a professional decorator. We had a question somebody asked, can a home decorator really make any money? If you're decorating cakes this quickly, your basic everyday birthday cake, you can make some money. So I want to tell you in the next video, we're also going to be talking about what are the opportunities for well-trained decorators. I think that we've touched on a few, but there really are so many that you may not have thought of before as a way to use this newfound skill. So, I mean, there's the obvious ones of making cakes for friends and family at home, but there really are so many and opportunities for you to earn some money with this skill.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we're super excited, guys. It's almost ready for you guys to take this course. Now, I heard that it's actually happening this Friday, that it'll be available for you this coming Friday. Now, I want you to know that there's going to be some things that are only offered this time that won't ever be offered again. So I want you to pay close attention to what those are so you can decide whether this first round is the time for you to get started in your new hobby or your new career. So please, again, leave some comments, and we will talk to you again in a few days in video 3.